What if I tell you that death is by no means the end? That the souls of the deceased can return to deliver an important message? Does that sound unbelievable? Then listen closely. A man falls asleep, and the next morning, he notices that his hair has turned completely gray. The reason? A visit from the world of the dead. Another man dreams of the deceased, takes their photo in hand, and something inexplicable happens. Fantasy. Georgij Znamenky, a master of psychology, researched such cases and was convinced, the deceased do not leave us. Today, we will tell you stories that will give you goosebumps. Why do the souls return? What keeps them in our world? And can prayers help them find peace? Stay with us, you won't want to miss this. On Earth, we are used to dividing people into the living and the dead. But have you ever wondered that only part of a person leaves, while the other continues to live on? I've met many who considered such thoughts to be nothing more than comforting illusions. Yet, even the most skeptical of them encountered phenomena that made them think. Georgij Znamenky, a master of psychology and professor, dedicated his life to studying such cases. He collected testimonies from people who had encountered the inexplicable and searched for an answer to the central question. Why do the deceased not forget their earthly existence? One of these stories happened with my acquaintance. He was in love and preparing for his wedding, but 2 weeks before the planned day, his fiancée fell ill. The illness was fatal, and after 3 months, she was gone. Georgij Znamenky told. The groom's sorrow was boundless, but time gradually erased the pain of the loss. One day, while on a business trip, he stayed with relatives. They gave him a separate room, and that night the household dog slept beside him. As soon as he closed his eyes and started to fall asleep, a dull growl from the dog interrupted the silence. Just a little thing, he thought, they probably locked a cat in the room. But when he looked around the room, which was illuminated by moonlight, he saw nothing suspicious. Meanwhile, the dog became more restless. Its fur was standing on end. The man was not a coward, but the animal's fear began to transfer to him. The fear grew and took hold of him more and more, until it became an overwhelming feeling of terror. And at that moment, he felt that someone was in the room. Soon, he saw her, his fiancée. She came to me to destroy my previous beliefs. Until that night, I didn't just not believe in God, I also didn't observe fasting or rituals and mocked those who did. When she appeared, my fiancé ordered me to read spiritual writings that speak of the immortality of the soul, the man recounted. The next morning, when he came to breakfast, he startled his family with his appearance. In one night, his hair had turned completely gray. Georgij Znamenky noted that it is impossible to give a precise answer to the question of whom and for what purpose the souls of the deceased appear, just as one cannot say why only some of them return to our world. From the accounts of witnesses, one thing becomes clear. They do not appear before those who experience strong fear or cannot bear their presence. Most often, the deceased appear in dreams. From the book Testimonies of the Deceased. Since the belief in the immortality of the soul and life after death illuminates our earthly path and helps us understand its meaning, many deceased appear with one goal: to convince those who doubt or have lost their faith. Other deceased appear to those who were close to them in life, to convince them of a soon reunion or to tell them how they are doing in the other world. But often, the souls return with a request. These are souls held back by earthly attachments. Georgij Znamenky emphasized that there are many reports proving that the deceased wait for prayers for themselves. They appear in dreams or even in a waking state to ask their loved ones to pray for their souls. One such case occurred on the 16th of July, 1771. In a dream, Archbishop Nill was visited by the deceased singer, who had once sung in the church choir. This man had died from cholera at the age of 24. He was wearing his usual coat, Archbishop Nill recalled. He quickly came to me and, silently, began to pour copper coins from his pockets. I asked, "What are you doing?" "I didn't manage to pay the photographer's debt," the singer replied. Archbishop Nil knew of this debt. The day before, a photographer had visited him and reported that the singer owed 4 rubles, according to his records. Archbishop Nil reassured the guest and promised that the debt would be paid. Then he asked, "Where are you now after death?" "Well, kind of in a closed place." "And Misha, our mutual acquaintance?" "No, he is not with me." "Who is with you then?" "Various scraps." "How are you there?" "Sad." Archbishop Nil thought for a moment and then asked, "Is there anything else I can do for you, apart from paying the debt?" "Pray for me." "I haven't heard a single prayer for me." After these words, the apparition disappeared. Archbishop Nil immediately ordered a soul mass, as promised. In the year 1750, the secretary of the Tver Social Aid Command, Senin, suddenly lost his father. He could not attend the funeral, but after a while, he visited the village. It comforted him a little, as he was able to see his father's grave. It happened on Pentecost when Selenin spent time praying for his father. At night, his father appeared to him. The young man was so shaken by this apparition that he exclaimed, "But you're no longer here." "No, I haven't died," the father replied softly. Then he bowed to his son. "Have mercy, father." "Why are you bowing to me?" asked Selenin. The father bowed again and said, "Thank you for not forgetting me in your prayers." When one thinks about the reasons the deceased returned to see the living, one can conclude that these are souls still bound by earthly thoughts. They especially need our prayers to help them ascend from the earth to the heavens. This is the conclusion Georgij Znamenki reached. Imagine this. A dream appears to you where your deceased wife says she will come to you after a certain time. You wake up in a cold sweat, but soon forget about it. And right at the appointed time, you leave this world. Coincidence or something more? Grigorij Jasenko, a renowned theologian, viewed death not as an end but as a metamorphosis, a transition to a new level of existence. He collected many stories that prove the soul of a person continues to exist and sometimes crosses the boundary between worlds. Today, we share stories of people who saw deceased relatives, heard their final messages, and even returned to life to share their discoveries. These stories will make you think, what awaits us beyond the boundary? The thought of death frightens us all. When we hear of someone passing, we express our condolences. Yet, at the same time, an inner joy fills us that we are still alive, unlike the one who has already left. But let us think. Perhaps, due to fear or the ease of perception, we fail to notice the revelations that occasionally break through the darkness separating us from the new level of existence? Grigorij Jasenko said, "In my opinion, these revelations are important evidence that alongside our world, there is another sphere of existence." He recalled the existence of a better world, where, as is inevitable, each of us will be. Jasenko believed that individual life has no end. He called death a metamorphosis and the human soul an essence. The theologian emphasized that the essence of a person is invisible and unreachable by our earthly senses. It is hidden from us, like much else in nature. But sometimes, for various reasons, souls can manifest in our world by using laws unknown to us in earthly life. Grigorij Jasenko told a story that happened in Simbursk, now Ulyanovsk. In a town, there lived a lonely old lady named Mrs. Uzating. One day, she saw a woman enter her room. At first, the old lady thought it was the one who occasionally helped her around the house, but then she recognized her protector, Ekaterina Andrejuna. Overcome with joy, she exclaimed and rushed to embrace the visitor, but the woman disappeared. Mrs. Uzating told her acquaintances about the apparition. She described in detail the outfit in which Ekaterina Andrejuna had appeared, a gray cloak with a raspberry red cord and a snow-white cap on her head. A few months later, Ekaterina Andrejuna's husband was passing through Simbursk and decided to visit Mrs. Uzating. The old lady began to describe her protector's clothing, and the gentleman was astonished because the cloak was the same outfit in which his wife had been buried on the day of her death. He had bought this exact outfit at her request when she was feeling better and asked for a new dress. Mr. Schoss is also associated with another astonishing story. He was able to predict the exact day of his death. One night, he dreamed of his wife, who told him that she would come for him on a specific day and at a specific hour. In this case, the details of Ekaterina Androgyuna's clothing were of great importance. Had she appeared in a dress known to Mrs. Usating, it could have been explained as a product of imagination. But the old lady knew nothing of the gray cloak with the raspberry-red cord. These details became concrete proof that it was indeed Ekaterina Androgyuna who had appeared before her. This story played an important role in the life of Mr. Schoss, whose views on life and death radically changed after this event. Is the day of our death predetermined? This thought could be strengthened after Mr. Schoss' story. However, Grigory Jasenko argued that this is not the case. A person can either draw closer to the day of their death or push it further away if a higher reason for it exists. To support these claims, he presents several stories. One of the stories concerns the 20-year-old daughter of Mr. Doty from Unda, Hatti, who suffered from a severe illness. A week before her death, she could no longer get out of bed. The family stayed by her side, waiting for her last breath. One day, during the day, her breath stopped. The relatives thought she had died. They didn't pay attention to the time and didn't notice how long she remained in this state. But suddenly, Hattie opened her eyes and, surprised, asked her mother, "What happened to me? Why did I come back here? I don't want to be here anymore." According to her statements, she had been far away from home and had seen many unknown people who greeted her. In this new place, she didn't feel sick at all. A few days later, the doctor visited her and said that her illness had improved. But Hattie firmly assured him that she would soon return to the place she had been on that day. A few days later, she died. One might say that this was just the delirium of a sick person, but it seems as though Hattie brought her relatives joyful news about life after death. Her mother recalled that she found comfort in her daughter's last words, in which she spoke about the immortality of the soul. "Our life doesn't end here," said the theologian Grigory Jatzchenko. Another story involves a not-so-wealthy landowner, burdened with a large family and limited means. He knew that he was the only support for his relatives. One day, the landowner fell seriously ill, and the doctors were sure that his time had come. The widow was overwhelmed with grief, mourning not only her husband but also her hard fate. Then the landowner began to pray, asking God to grant him life at least until he could provide for his older sons and ensure that they would take care of the younger ones. After this prayer, he fell asleep and slept for a long time. When he awoke, he called his wife to him and joyfully reported that, in his sleep, he had seen Archbishop Joseph Gorlenko, whom he had known during his lifetime. The archbishop told him, "Through your prayer and in regard to your children, you will live 20 more years." The landowner told his wife about the dream and asked her to write it down. Soon after, his condition drastically improved, and just as in the dream, he lived exactly 20 more years, until he died on the appointed day. The record of this story became a family heirloom for his descendants. Such testimonies of the soul's departure from the earthly shell should help us rid ourselves of the false fear of death and help us understand its true meaning correctly, noted Grigory Jatzchenko. We should not fear the transition to another level of existence, for there are no diseases, no separations, and no bitter disappointments that accompany us on earth. If you liked this material, don't forget to leave a like, a comment, and subscribe. Your support helps develop the channel and create even more interesting content.